The film begins in Los Angeles, where a mysterious person carefully prepares an arsenal of weapons, hinting that they are planning something sinister. The scene then shifts to a nightclub, where the owner, Sully, is seen yelling at a stripper for taking a break. Moments later, he leaves the club to go home, but suddenly, a masked figure paralyzes him and kidnaps him. Some time later, we meet a police officer named Jackson, who is hanging out with his partner. He is also kidnapped by the same masked figure, who sprays tear gas in his partner's eyes before fleeing. Meanwhile, another man named Coogan is in a nearby cafe, watching the news about a series of kidnappings in the city. He becomes concerned and leaves the place, only to feel someone following him. Coogan pulls out a knife to defend himself, but the stranger quickly paralyzes him with an electric shock and drags him away. The next victim is a young man named Christian, who is seen leaving a bar late at night. We then meet Kelly Murphy, who is also kidnapped by the stranger after being paralyzed with an electric shock. In the next scene, we see all the kidnapped victims in the same room, tied to posts with bags over their heads. Moments later, the masked man turns on the lights and begins to remove the bags and tape from their mouths, one by one. It is revealed that there are a total of 9 captives in the room. Along with those we have already seen, there are new victims, such as Leon, Eddie, a priest named Father Francis, and a Chinese woman, Chan, who does not speak English. All the victims are confused as to why they are there and begin to curse the masked man. However, the kidnapper calmly informs them that they have all been brought there for a specific reason, and it is up to them to figure out why. He warns that he will return every 10 minutes and kill one of them if they do not discover the truth. But if they manage to do so, he promises to release the remaining survivors and confess all his crimes to the police. With that said, the masked man throws some pieces of chalk on the floor, activates the timer, and leaves the room. The captives' hands are suddenly freed, and they begin to wonder what they could have done to deserve such punishment. Eddie points to Father Francis, suggesting that he may have abused a child, but the priest insists that he has never hurt anyone in his life. At that moment, Coogan confesses that he did abuse a child, causing the others to curse and yell at him. Eddie then takes a piece of chalk and begins writing on the wall as everyone introduces themselves one by one. Kelly reveals that he is a district attorney and has sent many criminals to prison, so one of them may be seeking revenge. Moments later, Christian recognizes Sully and remembers doing business with him a few years ago. It turns out that Sully is a loan shark who gave Christian $5,000 for drugs. Christian was arrested while trying to sell them and served 3 years in prison. But when he got out, he eventually paid Sully back, as the man had a very feared reputation. However, Christian clarifies that he has left that life behind and is now pursuing a career in Hollywood while working as a bartender. Soon, the timer runs out and the masked man enters the room, demanding to know if they have figured out why they are there. Kelly asks for more time, but he ignores her and approaches Christian to whisper something in his ear. The shocked young man says he never would have guessed, just before the masked man brutally shoots him to death. Everyone screams in terror as the kidnapper drags the body away, locks the door, and resets the timer. The captives then begin to fight among themselves and urge each other to confess their sins. Suddenly, Coogan reveals that he has just been released after 5 years in prison. He served a shorter sentence because the authorities never found the child's body, leaving everyone horrified and disgusted. Kelly then asks Leon about his past, and he admits that he used to steal with his brother. This surprises everyone, but he justifies himself by saying that at least he never killed anyone or touched children. After this, Eddie opens up about himself and reveals that he is a health insurance executive. He claims to be a good person who has never done anything wrong in his life. He explains that his company conducts experimental medical trials and, a couple of years ago, his brother-in-law was diagnosed with colon cancer. Eddie admits that he helped his brother-in-law get treatment by forging some documents, but he doesn't understand why he would be punished for simply trying to help his family. Later, the group notices that Kelly and Jackson know each other and demand to know the nature of their relationship. Kelly reveals that they had an affair, but Jackson's wife found out, after which she divorced him and moved to Arizona with the children. The group theorizes that it might be his ex-wife seeking revenge, but Jackson disagrees, as he sends her a large sum of money every month. Leon then has an idea and asks Sully, who is next to him, to kick his arm so he can break free from the handcuffs. Sully, who enjoys hitting people, agrees without hesitation and starts kicking him. The plan works smoothly, and Leon manages to free his hand, which excites everyone. Jackson then tells him to hide behind the door and attack the killer when he enters. However, Leon refuses to help anyone and gives them an obscene gesture before leaving on his own. But he doesn't get very far before encountering the kidnapper, who has been watching everything on camera. They engage in an intense fight, but Leon manages to overpower him and even grabs his gun. He has him at gunpoint, but the latter calmly reveals that he has been planning this for 2 years and nothing will stop him. It turns out that Leon's gun is not loaded, and when he tries to run, the kidnapper shoots him, leaving him seriously injured. Moments later, the other captives watch in horror as the masked man drags the wounded Leon back to the cell and handcuffs him again. Once again, he demands to know why they are there, but no one has any idea. When the killer approaches Coogan with a gun, Coogan asks him to move the others away to avoid getting blood on them, as he doesn't want them to die so soon. The kidnapper whispers something in his ear, and Coogan accepts that it's a good reason. He then tries to choke the masked man, but the latter easily overpowers him and shoots him in the heart. As he drags Coogan's lifeless body out of the room, he warns Leon that she will be the next victim. The timer resets once again and the group's anxiety deepens, as they still have no idea why they are there. A sudden ray of hope appears when Chan recognizes Kelly and begins speaking in Mandarin. Since no one else understands her, Chan uses the chalk to draw something and even says bang, bang, implying gunshots. At this point, Kelly finally recognizes her and asks if her name is Nung Chan, which the woman confirms. It turns out that a few years ago, Kelly handled a robbery case involving a liquor store owned by Chan. The elderly woman identified the criminal, a 20-year-old named Wade Greeley, whom Kelly sent to prison. However, they still can't connect everything, as they only have the robbery and a name. With only 2 minutes left, Leon decides to confess and admits that he lied when he said he hadn't killed anyone. It turns out that he killed his own brother after a business betrayal and sold all his guns afterward. A remorseful Leon now asks for forgiveness, and the priest tells him, "He who seeks forgiveness will find it." Bleeding from his wound, Leon recalls the kidnapper's words that he had been planning this for 2 years. This gives the group some hope, and they try to remember what they were doing at the time. Moments later, the door opens, and when the killer realizes they still don't have an answer, he shoots Leon and drags him outside. Amid the chaos and confusion, Father Francis suddenly reveals that he knows why they are here, but he cannot reveal it. It's because he heard it in confession, and his relationship with God is more important to him than his own life. Sully tries to persuade him, and Kelly even threatens to kill him, but Father Francis refuses to say anything. Eddie suggests that they may have to figure it out without the priest and asks everyone to reveal their darkest secrets. The group begins to confess horrible things they have done, but Father Francis makes it clear that they are going in the wrong direction. He gives clues and reveals that Wade Greeley was not involved in the robbery. Kelly argues that this is not true, as Chan was an eyewitness and they also had solid evidence. However, Eddie guesses that someone in the room confessed to the priest and assumes it was Christian. The priest confirms this, and in a shocking twist, they discover that Christian was the one who robbed the store to pay off his debt to Sully. This infuriates Sully, who finds it ridiculous to have to die just because he lent $5,000 to a kid. After the 10 minutes are up, the killer arrives, and Sully begins to yell about being punished for such a minor problem. He challenges the killer to shoot him, but the man ignores him and turns to Eddie. But just as he pulls the trigger, Father Francis suddenly steps in front of Eddie and takes the shot instead. As the killer drags the priest's body away, Kelly tries to reason with him and even calls him by the name Wade. The man stops and reveals that he is not Wade before leaving the room. When the timer resets, Jackson suggests that the man could be someone close to Wade, such as a friend or family member. But Kelly counters that no one was present at his trial and he doesn't remember anyone anyway, as it was a long time ago. However, it turns out that Wade went to prison 5 years ago, which Jackson finds strange, because the killer has only been planning this for 2 years. At this point, Sully has a revelation and remembers how Christian claimed he had nothing when he got out of prison. But it would have been impossible for him to have carried out the liquor store robbery without a gun. He remembers Leon saying that he sold the guns after killing his brother and suspects that he was the one who sold Christian the gun. That explains why the rest of them are in the cell, but they still can't figure out how Coogan, Eddie, and Jackson are connected to this. Soon, the timer runs out again, and the killer enters the room. He gives Chan a piece of paper with writing in Mandarin, and she finally understands the reasoning behind everything. The terrified woman falls to her knees, crying and desperately begging for forgiveness. But the man shows her no mercy and brutally shoots her to death. This terrifies Kelly, who begs the killer to release her, saying she has a son who needs his mother. However, the killer asks her when she last spent time with her son, who is mostly cared for by a nanny. He tells her not to use her son as an excuse, then abruptly turns to Jackson, saying that this should enrage him too. After the killer leaves, a confused Jackson asks what the hell that means, and it turns out that he is actually the father of Kelly's son. He is enraged that she hid such information from him. He even calls her a selfish and immoral woman who is probably hiding something big. Kelly hesitates and says she would be practically dead if this information came out, but finally agrees to reveal the truth. She admits that, at the time, Wade was picked up not far from the liquor store and matched Chan's description. However, she had no solid evidence and really needed a win after losing case after case. She was the worst performing lawyer at the time, and no one took her seriously. So, to keep her job, she decided to frame Wade. It turns out that Chan had grabbed some of Christian's hair during the struggle. Kelly then stole some hair from Wade's comb, after which she decided to use her lover, Jackson. She snuck into the evidence room because he had access and switched the hair sample. This means that Jackson unknowingly helped to falsify evidence, which caused the poor boy to go to prison. Upon hearing this, everyone is disgusted by her actions, but Kelly says that this can never be known, as she would go to prison and lose her job and her son. The group begins to theorize that the killer must be Wade's father, who is seeking revenge for his son. They begin to speculate about what happened to Wade after he went to prison and assume that he must have crossed paths with Coogan, who was also convicted 5 years ago. But with the timer quickly counting down, they still can't figure out Eddie's connection to the whole story. Moments later, the killer enters the room and, when they fail to provide a complete answer, mercilessly kills Sully. After the man leaves, only Kelly, Jackson, and Eddie remain, who are extremely anxious and terrified. Eddie recalls how, before Coogan died, he was begging the killer not to splash his blood on anyone, fearing that it would lead to their deaths. Eddie theorizes that Coogan must have had AIDS and perhaps met Wade in prison, where he assaulted him and infected him. The other two dismiss this theory as nonsense, but Eddie explains that his company was conducting drug trials to prolong the lives of AIDS patients around the time Wade was released from prison. Part of Eddie's job involved rejecting candidates, and according to company policy, he used to reject people with criminal records, the wrong age, inadequate insurance, or insufficient funds. Eddie admits that it may have been him who rejected Wade's application because of his criminal record. That's why Wade's father began plotting his revenge 2 years ago, as that was when his son died. Moments later, the killer enters the room once again and asks if they have discovered the truth. Eddie proceeds to tell him everything they have discovered, after which the man removes his mask. He reveals that his son was a very brave boy and that every person in the room could have prevented his death. The old man tells them to remember what they did and the consequences of their actions for the rest of their lives. He then gives Kelly the key to free herself and the others, saying that the police are on their way. But after removing her handcuffs, Kelly suddenly attacks him and steals his gun. She reveals that if the truth comes out, her life will be ruined, and she can't let that happen. She shoots the old man and immediately afterwards shoots Eddie and Jackson, killing them. However, it is revealed that the old man is still alive, thanks to his bulletproof vest. He tells Kelly that everyone has been watching the recording and now they will see who Kelly Murphy really is. But she doesn't care and shoots him directly in the head. In the final scene, Kelly leaves the cell just as the police arrive at the building. She manages to slip away from them, but it is clear that she will not be able to escape the consequences, as the entire ordeal has already been broadcast to the public.